You know that moment when you wake up one day and realize you're living a life that doesn't feel like yours? That was me. I wasn't broken, I wasn't lost, but I was stuck. And the truth is, transformation doesn't begin when life gets easy. It begins when you decide that staying the same is no longer an option. Today, I want to share with you exactly how I transformed myself and built my dream life, not because I had all the answers, but because I refused to quit until I found them. Facing the truth about who you are. Transformation doesn't start when you change your job, your relationship, or your city. It starts when you change your level of honesty with yourself. The most powerful step in creating my dream life wasn't learning new skills or setting new goals. It was facing the raw, uncomfortable truth about who I really was and how I was showing up in my life. For a long time, I told myself stories that kept me comfortable. I told myself I was doing my best. I told myself I just needed more time, more support, more luck, but deep down I knew the truth. I was holding back. I was scared of failing, so I played small. I was scared of being judged, so I hid my ambitions behind excuses. Facing that truth was painful, but it was also the turning point. Because when you finally admit that your life is a reflection of your choices, you take back your power to change it. The moment I stopped lying to myself, everything shifted. I realized that self-awareness is the foundation of transformation. It's not about guilt or shame, it's about clarity. I sat with myself and asked difficult questions. What am I avoiding? What fears are controlling my decisions? Why am I saying I want success but behaving in ways that sabotage it? Those questions forced me to confront uncomfortable patterns. I saw how often I let distractions, doubts, and other people's opinions dictate my path. I saw how I'd been chasing validation instead of purpose. The truth hurt, but it also opened the door to growth. When you shine a light on your patterns, you can finally change them. I began journaling daily, not to record my goals, but to record my truth. I wrote down my frustrations, my habits, and my emotional triggers. I started noticing how often I complained without taking action. How often I compared myself to others instead of focusing on my lane. How often I settled for good enough, because excellence required more effort. That awareness became the mirror I needed to face, and once I saw the real reflection, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't go back to pretending. I had to evolve. Facing the truth about who you are doesn't mean rejecting yourself. It means understanding yourself so deeply that you can build something greater. It means acknowledging your weaknesses, not to dwell on them, but to design systems that overcome them. It means owning your patterns, your fears, your mistakes, and still saying, I am capable of more. That's where transformation begins, in the moment you decide that the version of you that's been surviving is not the version that's meant to lead your dream life. Building discipline over motivation. For the longest time, I believed that motivation was the secret to success. I thought that if I could just stay inspired, if I could just keep that fire burning inside me, I would achieve everything I dreamed of. But motivation is like a spark. It ignites quickly and burns out just as fast. What truly changes your life is discipline, not motivation. Discipline is the quiet force that shows up when you don't feel like it, the voice that tells you to keep going when excitement fades. It's what separates people who dream from those who build. I had to learn that waiting to feel ready was the biggest trap holding me back. I used to tell myself I'd start when I felt more confident, when the timing was better, when I had more energy. But all those thoughts were just elegant excuses dressed as preparation. The truth was, I needed structure, not inspiration. Discipline became my anchor when emotions tried to control my progress. I created systems that didn't depend on how I felt. I set routines that started before sunrise, moments that grounded me and reminded me of my purpose. I didn't wait to feel motivated to go to the gym, to write, to study, or to show up for my goals. I simply did it because I said I would. That was my new definition of integrity, doing what I promised myself I'd do, even when no one was watching. And at first, it wasn't glamorous, it was uncomfortable, even boring at times, but repetition built rhythm, and rhythm built momentum. Soon, I wasn't forcing discipline, it was becoming who I was. Every small act of consistency built a layer of confidence. I stopped questioning whether I could do it because my actions proved that I could. Motivation gives you excitement, but discipline gives you results. I realized that the people who achieve greatness aren't more talented or more inspired, they're simply more consistent. They don't negotiate with their feelings, they operate on commitments. I started tracking my progress, not in how I felt, but in what I executed. I rewarded effort, not perfection. I made failure part of my system instead of something to fear. Because when discipline leads the way, even mistakes become lessons that move you forward. The shift from motivation to discipline changed everything about how I approached my life. I stopped relying on bursts of energy and started relying on structure. I built habits that aligned with my goals instead of waiting for emotion to drive me. Over time, that structure gave me freedom. The freedom to trust myself, the freedom to grow, and the freedom to know that no matter how I felt, I would always follow through on what mattered most. Redefining my environment, one of the biggest realizations I had on my journey to transformation was that no matter how strong your mindset is, your environment can either fuel your growth or suffocate it. You cannot outgrow an environment that constantly pulls you back into your old patterns. For years, I surrounded myself with people and places that kept me comfortable, not accountable. I didn't realize it then, but I was living inside a circle that normalized mediocrity. The conversations were small, the dreams were limited, and the energy was stagnant. Every time I tried to level up, I felt resistance not because I couldn't do it, but because my surroundings weren't built for expansion. Redefining my environment became one of the most radical and liberating steps I ever took in creating my dream life. I began to observe how deeply the people around me influenced my habits, beliefs, and ambitions. If you spend time around people who constantly complain, you start to think that complaining is normal. If you spend time around people who doubt themselves, you begin to believe that doubt is a sign of humility. I had to learn to protect my mental space the same way I protect my home. I started saying no more often, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. I wanted to be in rooms where my goals didn't intimidate people, but inspired them. I wanted to be around individuals who talked about progress, not problems. So I made intentional choices. I read books that expanded my thinking. I followed voices that spoke to growth and leadership. I sought mentors who lived the kind of life I was building, not the kind of life I was leaving behind. Changing my environment didn't just mean changing people, it meant changing habits, routines, and even the physical spaces where I spent my time. I decluttered my workspace, redesigned my daily flow, and created environments that aligned with focus and productivity. My mornings became sacred, my evenings became intentional. I realized that even the smallest details, what I listened to, what I watched, what I tolerated, shaped who I was becoming. Growth requires space, and sometimes that means outgrowing comfort zones that once felt like home. When I redefined my environment, I discovered that energy is contagious. The right environment makes success feel natural, not forced. It reminds you of who you are becoming, not who you used to be. Every conversation, every room, every routine carries energy. And that energy determines whether you evolve or stay the same. Redefining your environment isn't about cutting people off. It's about creating conditions that allow you to rise. It's about choosing alignment over attachment, expansion over comfort, and purpose over familiarity, learning the power of ownership. There came a point in my life when I realized that as long as I kept blaming circumstances, people, or timing for where I was, I would never move forward. I used to think ownership meant taking responsibility only when things went right. But true ownership is about taking full accountability for everything, your wins, your losses, your emotions, Results. It's the understanding that while you cannot control what happens to you, you can always control how you respond. When I embraced ownership, it was like turning on a light in a room I didn't even know was dark. I stopped saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and started asking, "What can I do about it?" That shift changed everything. It moved me from victim to leader, from reactive to proactive, from waiting to creating. I began to see how often I had handed my power away without realizing it. Every time I said someone else was the reason for my unhappiness, I was giving them control over my peace. Every time I said I didn't have time, I was letting my distractions dictate my destiny. Ownership meant reclaiming that control. It meant accepting that my habits, my thoughts, and my decisions were the architects of my reality. When you take ownership, excuses no longer have a home in your life. You begin to understand that your circumstances are not limitations, they are feedback. They show you where you need to grow, where you need to focus, and where you need to take a new direction. The truth is, ownership is uncomfortable because it strips away the safety of blame. It forces you to confront the reality that your results are your responsibility. But that discomfort is where your strength is built. I had to stop seeking validation from others and start validating myself through action. I had to stop waiting for someone to rescue me and start becoming the person who rescues myself. Ownership made me realize that no one was coming to fix my life for me. It was on me to set the standard, to make the changes, to build the habits that supported my goals. When I began to live with ownership, I noticed a sense of clarity I had never felt before. Instead of being overwhelmed by problems, I started focusing on solutions. Instead of seeing challenges as setbacks, I started viewing them as opportunities to grow. Ownership gave me the courage to admit when I was wrong, the humility to learn, and the confidence to keep moving forward. It's not about perfection. It's about progress through responsibility. When you fully step into ownership, you stop negotiating with your excuses and start negotiating with your potential. You stop waiting for the world to change and instead focus on changing yourself, first designing a vision worth fighting, for there was a time when I thought having a dream was enough, that simply wanting a better life would somehow attract it to me, but dreams without direction fade into frustration. I had to learn that transformation only becomes real when your vision is clear, detailed, and emotionally charged. Designing a vision worth fighting for means creating a picture of your future so vivid that it pulls you forward even on the days you feel like giving up. It's not just about what you want to achieve, it's about who you want to become in the process. I sat down one day with a notebook and wrote everything out. I wrote about what my mornings would look like, how I would feel walking into my workspace, what kind of people I would surround myself with, and what kind of impact I wanted to make. I didn't edit or filter any of it. I let myself dream without limits, because vision should be bigger than fear. When I started designing that vision, I realized that clarity creates power. Most people drift through life reacting to circumstances instead of designing outcomes. I didn't want to live that way anymore. I began to reverse, engineer my vision, breaking it down into small, intentional steps. I asked myself, what would the future version of me do right now? How would she spend her time? What would she prioritize? What would she tolerate? Those questions became my compass. They guided my daily choices, and over time, those small, consistent actions started shaping my reality. The gap between who I was and who I wanted to be began to shrink, not because I had all the answers, but because I was willing to take imperfect action in the direction of my vision. Designing a vision worth fighting for also meant learning to protect it. When you're building something new, not everyone will understand it, and that's okay. I had to stop explaining my dreams to people who didn't share them. I learned to keep my energy focused on progress, not on convincing others to believe in me. I reminded myself daily that my vision was mine to nurture, mine to fight for, and mine to bring to life. It wasn't about chasing motivation or waiting for permission. It was about creating alignment between my goals and my actions. Every choice I made either moved me closer to that vision or further away from it. And once I understood that, I started living with more intention. I stopped multitasking and started mastering focus. I stopped dreaming casually and started designing strategically. My vision became my standard, not my wish. And when your vision is clear, your effort becomes consistent. It gives you something worth sacrificing for, something worth waking up early for, something that makes every challenge feel purposeful. Designing a vision worth fighting for is about understanding that your dream life won't appear by accident. It's built through clarity, consistency, and the courage to never settle for less than what you were meant to create.